Theaters are empty. Disney merchandise is vanishing from shelves, and Rachel Zegler, the supposed next big thing, has become public enemy number one. The 2025 Snow White remake was supposed to be a surefire hit, a beloved classic reimagined for a modern audience, led by a rising star, and backed by Disney's billion-dollar marketing machine. But what actually happened was something no one saw coming, not even the critics. We're talking record-breaking bad reviews, audience walkouts, and rumors that Disney is quietly trying to erase all signs that this film ever existed. This isn't just another box office flop. It's a full-blown Hollywood meltdown. And the question on everyone's mind, how did a company like Disney spend nearly $500 million on a movie that nobody wanted to see? Buckle up because this is the story of how Snow White 2025 went from highly anticipated remake to one of the most catastrophic disasters in Disney history. The first warning sign came quietly, a handful of underwhelming preview numbers. But as opening weekend arrived, it became undeniable. Major theaters were half full, if not completely empty. And within 48 hours, the IMDb rating plunged to an unprecedented 1.0 out of 10, a number more common for student films on YouTube than a Disney tentpole with hundreds of millions behind it. This wasn't just bad, it was apocalyptic. Fans who did show up started posting pictures of deserted auditoriums. One viral post read, "More dwarfs than viewers in my theater." And there aren't even real dwarfs in the movie. That comment alone captured just how disillusioned people were with this so-called reimagining. Meanwhile, the production budget had reportedly ballooned past $250 million just for principal photography and post-production. Add in a global marketing campaign and a delayed rollout, and estimates now peg the total spend at close to $350 million. To break even, the film would have needed a box office performance on par with Avengers: Endgame. Instead, it couldn't even beat a mid-tier horror movie in its second week. But terrible numbers were just the beginning. What really shocked people was what they saw or didn't see on screen. Within hours of release, reviews started flooding in, not from critics, from regular moviegoers, and the word that kept popping up was unhinged. Viewers described Snow White as a chaotic mess, a movie that felt like a disjointed fever dream stitched together with reshoots and desperation. According to insiders, the film went through at least 3 major rounds of reshoots, each one attempting to fix earlier story problems. But instead of solving them, each pass made things worse. Scenes start and end abruptly, character arcs vanish mid-film, and the pacing is all over the place. One particularly baffling moment features the entire cast dressed in matching white outfits, dancing in a forest for no clear reason. The audience reaction? Confused silence. And that's when the theories started. People online began comparing notes, pointing out glaring continuity errors, odd dialogue choices, and scenes that felt completely out of sync with the rest of the film. One user described it best. It felt like watching a trailer for a movie that doesn't exist. But if the film's structure was falling apart, its star was doing even more damage off-screen. If the movie itself was a mess, Rachel Zegler became its lightning rod. In the months leading up to release, she gave a series of interviews that many now believe helped torpedo the film's already shaky prospects. Instead of building goodwill, she came across, to a growing number of viewers, as smug, dismissive, and wildly out of touch. One moment that sparked particular backlash came when Ziegler said, "If I'm in that dress for 18 hours a day, I expect to be paid for 18 hours." What might have been a throwaway line about labor rights was instantly taken out of context and weaponized. People weren't just annoyed, they were livid. Here was a rising star, reportedly earning a multi-million-dollar paycheck, complaining about work hours for a role most actors would kill to land. And this wasn't just any role. This was Snow White, Disney royalty. To many, she came off as ungrateful. But that wasn't the only incident. She stirred further controversy when she revisited her time on West Side Story, accusing unnamed crew members of racially charged behavior and suggesting that she had to prove her Latina heritage during filming. While some sympathized, others accused her of playing the victim and stirring up division without offering solutions. The damage continued to pile on when clips resurfaced of Zegler mocking the original Snow White for its love story. "It's 1937, she said in one viral soundbite. "We're not doing that anymore." Instead of celebrating a timeless fairy tale, she positioned the remake as a corrective, a story where the prince doesn't matter and romance is an afterthought. Her intention may have been to modernize the character, but the delivery backfired badly. Social media, always hungry for controversy, turned her into a meme overnight. Comments poured in. She hates the movie she's in. She thinks she's too good for the role. She's insufferable. It was no longer just about the film. It was about Rachel Zegler herself and whether she was fit to carry a Disney franchise. And perhaps the most brutal blow came not from her critics, but from people who once supported her. In the past, Disney superfans were often the first to defend controversial casting choices or bold creative swings. Not this time. Influencers, reviewers, and lifelong fans who typically go easy on Disney began openly criticizing Snow White, and they weren't holding back. One former Disney content creator, known for reviewing every park attraction and defending every reboot, posted a scathing breakdown of the film. He called the script directionless, the cinematography cheap, and the tone confused beyond repair. His conclusion? "I wanted this to work. I needed this to work, but I can't lie. It's terrible." These weren't trolls or people with a political agenda. These were the diehards, people who gave The Little Mermaid remake the benefit of the doubt, who lined up for Mulan, who cried at The Lion King 2019. If they were jumping ship, it meant something serious was going on. What stood out most was the consistency of the complaints. Fans weren't mad that the movie was woke or that it changed a few things. They were mad because the story didn't work. They felt it betrayed the heart of Snow White, not because it updated her, but because it forgot who she was. People weren't asking for the prince to save the day, but they were asking for a plot, a rhythm, a soul. And when even the most loyal Disney defenders started mocking the now infamous white costume dance sequence, it became clear that something had snapped. And behind the scenes, Disney seemed to know it too. While the internet dragged the film and Rachel Zegler took heat in interviews, something else started happening, quietly and almost without anyone noticing. Disney merchandise tied to Snow White 2025 began vanishing, not just from front displays, from stores altogether. Several fans noticed it first at major retailers like Target and Walmart. Promotional items that were supposed to accompany the film's release, dolls, clothing, backpacks, and books, were either missing entirely, pulled early, or never fully rolled out. In some cases, products were spotted in clearance bins just weeks after launch, with some stores allegedly refusing to restock them at all. Disney hasn't made any formal announcement, but that silence speaks volumes. For a company that usually saturates the market with merchandise around every big release, think Frozen, Encanto, even the Jungle Book remake, this sudden retreat raises eyebrows. Where were the commercials? Where were the display stands? Why did the official Snow White dolls barely get a marketing push? Some insiders speculate that Disney made the decision mid-promo cycle to quietly cut losses. After all, marketing dollars are best spent where there's hype, not where there's open hostility. Pulling back on merchandise before it becomes an even bigger liability could be a calculated effort to prevent further embarrassment. Others think this may be the first time in modern Disney history that the company is actively distancing itself from a project while it's still in theaters. Not after, not during the post mortem, but while the release is still live. And that's not something a studio does unless there's a very good reason. But the question remains, how did this get so far? How did Snow White survive reshoots, marketing plans, and early test screenings, only to collapse on release? For that, we need to look beyond the film and into the boardroom panic. Once the early numbers came in, Disney executives knew they had a problem, a massive one, and almost immediately, the tone inside the company shifted. According to anonymous sources from the promotional team, meetings were held to reallocate marketing resources, reduce exposure, and limit the damage. Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, went on record trying to spin the backlash. He claimed the studio's focus was on entertainment, not messaging. But to many, it was already too late. That kind of damage control works if the product is decent. But when the film is being laughed out of theaters and merch is being pulled from shelves, even the best PR strategy can't hold the line. Behind closed doors, there were reportedly growing tensions between Disney's creative departments and financial teams. Those who greenlit the project and pushed for a modern retelling were being questioned by the very people who signed the checks. And the investors? Furious. Shareholders began asking hard questions. Why was this film allowed to go this far off track? How did the budget spiral out of control? And most of all, who's accountable? The blame didn't fall on one person, but many pointed fingers landed squarely on Ziegler, not because she made the film flop on her own, but because her public persona made it harder for Disney to contain the fallout. Every time she went viral, for the wrong reasons, the situation worsened. Internally, it became clear that Snow White 2025 had gone from risky experiment to financial cautionary tale, and the ripple effects may not stop here. Snow White 2025 isn't just a movie that bombed, it's a warning shot, and studios across Hollywood are watching closely. Because what happened here didn't just cost hundreds of millions. It shattered a myth that's kept the remake industry alive for over a decade. The idea that nostalgia always sells. For years, Disney believed it could take any animated classic, slap on a glossy new look, add a few modern twists, and print money. That worked for a while. Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, even The Jungle Book. None of them were flawless, but they had enough charm, enough reverence for the originals, and enough audience goodwill to pull it off. But Snow White? That's where the magic broke. This time, Disney didn't just modernize the story, it reconstructed it, stripped away the romance, removed the iconic dwarfs, added new messaging, and then handed the crown to an actress who openly criticized the original material. It was no longer a tribute, it was a total reinvention, and fans didn't buy it. And here's the twist. Even viewers who support progressive storytelling weren't impressed, because it wasn't the ideas that offended people, it was the execution, the sloppy edits, the inconsistent tone, the feeling that no one knew what kind of movie they were making. That's what drove people away. The lesson here isn't don't update the classics, it's don't forget why they mattered in the first place. Disney misjudged how much reverence audiences still have for these original stories, and now every future remake is going to face way more scrutiny. Studios are already scrambling, some projects rumored to be in development. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Pocahontas, even a Hercules live action may now be in jeopardy. Because if Snow White, one of the most iconic characters in animation history, can't survive a remake, What chance does anything else have? But this backlash also unlocked a deeper realization. Audiences are done being taken for granted. Recognizable IP isn't enough anymore. Viewers want good storytelling, not just familiar names wrapped in modern packaging. And perhaps the most dangerous idea to come out of this saga is that Disney might not have learned its lesson yet. As the dust settles, Rachel Zegler remains front and center, not as a breakout star, but as the face of one of Disney's biggest failures in decades. Her continued efforts to defend the film haven't softened criticism, they've intensified it. In a recent interview, she doubled down, suggesting that the backlash was fueled by people uncomfortable with progress. But that narrative isn't landing because the criticism has come from all directions, from liberal film critics, conservative pundits, die-hard Disney fans, and casual moviegoers alike. When everyone is saying the same thing, that the film simply wasn't good, it's hard to blame politics. Zegler's Hollywood prospects, once sky high, are now unclear. Casting directors are reportedly hesitant. Audiences are wary, and industry insiders are openly asking whether she can carry a major franchise again, or if this role has permanently dimmed her star power. One viral comment put it bluntly: she had the role of a lifetime, and she talked her way out of it. Meanwhile, Disney is still bleeding. Financial analysts estimate that Snow White 2025 will not only fail to break even, it may end up losing over $200 million when factoring in marketing, reshoots, and merchandise losses. This makes it one of the worst performing live action adaptations in the company's modern history, and the finger pointing has begun. Some blame the writing team for gutting the story's heart. Others say the executive leadership pushed a vision that didn't make sense for the material. A few quietly blame Zegler's PR disasters. And the boldest voices? They're pointing directly at Bob Iger, calling this the clearest sign yet that Disney's strategy needs a total overhaul. The failure has already begun reshaping how Disney approaches its future lineup. Internal reports suggest that multiple upcoming live-action remakes are being quietly reassessed. Budgets are being trimmed. Creative freedom is being reined in. The message from the top seems to be clear: don't let this happen again. And here's the bigger picture. Snow White 2025 wasn't just a failed movie. It became a symbol. A symbol of what happens when legacy IP is mishandled. A warning about letting ideology override storytelling, and a reminder that even the most powerful studio in the world can lose the audience if it forgets what made people care in the first place. In the end, Snow White 2025 tried to be revolutionary, but instead, it became cautionary. A film that wanted to redefine a fairy tale, and instead broke the trust of the very audience it needed to survive. Rachel Zegler may continue defending it. Disney may try to bury it, but the internet never forgets. And neither do the fans. The bigger question now is, what happens next? Does Disney double down? Or do they finally take a hard look at why this happened? If you made it this far, tell us in the comments. Was Snow White 2025 doomed from the start? Or could it have been saved? Because if there's one thing this story proves, it's that even the most magical kingdom in the world can crumble when it loses the plot.